I signed the divorce agreement in a room colder than a morgue, watching my husband smile like he had just stripped me of my entire life. He thought he had won. He believed he was taking everything from me, leaving me with zero. But the box I left on the mahogany table was not a surrender. It was the detonator that would bring his family empire crashing down. He never saw the real war coming. My name is Harper Caldwell. I am 33 years old, and until recently, I was a lead product designer at Northline Brandworks in Milwaukee. I used to solve problems for a living. I fixed ergonomics. I streamlined user interfaces. I made things work. But standing in the center of our cramped rental apartment with the smell of sour milk clinging to my oversized t-shirt, I could not fix the man standing in the doorway. I had barely slept in 48 hours. My hands were shaking with a tremor that had become my constant companion since the twins arrived. I was holding on to reality by a thread, telling myself that the exhaustion was temporary, that we were going to be okay. Then Grant walked in. Grant Whitaker, my husband, the man who once held my hair back when I was sick. He stood on the welcome mat, but he did not look like the man I married. His eyes were void of light, dull and flat like polished stones. He did not look at the two bassinets where our children were finally sleeping. He did not take off his wet trench coat. He looked at me like I was a stranger he had met in a waiting room. "I am not doing this anymore," he said. His voice was terrifyingly even, no inflection, no emotion. It sounded like he was reading a line from a teleprompter. I blinked, trying to clear the fog of sleep deprivation from my brain. "Grant, you are scaring me. Why are you wearing your coat? Did something happen at the firm?" He shifted his weight but did not step forward. "This life, us, I cannot do it. I have responsibilities. Harper. Real ones." My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic rhythm that made me feel sick. Responsibilities. These are your children sleeping 5 feet away. I am your wife. Grant, what are you saying? He looked at the wall behind my head, refusing to meet my eyes. I have a future to think about. The Whitaker legacy requires focus. This environment is not compatible with where I am going. I took a step toward him, and he actually recoiled, his hand twitching by his side. That small movement hurt more than a slap. "Are you leaving me?" I whispered, my voice cracking. "Or are you leaving them?" "It is complicated," he said, reciting the words robotically. "You will hear from someone. Just do not make this difficult. Grant, you cannot just walk out. They are 6 weeks old. I can't." I choked on a sob, grabbing the edge of the sofa to stay upright. "I can't do this alone. You are resourceful, Harper. You always have been." And then he turned. He opened the door, stepped out into the gray Milwaukee drizzle, and closed it. The click of the lock sounded like a gunshot in the quiet apartment. I stood there for 5 minutes, unable to move. I expected him to come back. I expected him to realize he had lost his mind. Instead, my phone buzzed on the coffee table. It was a notification from our bank. "Alert joint checking account access revoked." I grabbed the phone, my thumbs slipping on the screen. I tried to log in. Access denied. I tried the credit card app. Card canceled. Then an email popped up at the top of the screen. It was a notification from our health insurance provider. Policy termination effective immediately. He had not just walked out. He had pressed a button. He had executed a command. Another buzz. A text message. It was from Vivian Whitaker, my mother-in-law. "Do not embarrass the Whitaker name. Silence makes everything easier for everyone." I felt the air leave the room. My chest tightened, squeezing my lungs until I gasped. This was coordinated. This was not a panic attack by a stressed new father. This was a strike. The phone rang in my hand. It was a number I did not recognize, an area code from New York. I answered it, my hand trembling so hard I almost dropped the device. "Hello. Listen to me carefully," a woman's voice said on the other end. She sounded hurried, muffled, like she was walking down a busy street. "Do not sue Pro C. Do not try to fight them without a shark. They have already written the story that makes you look crazy. They have the narrative ready." "Who is this?" I asked. "Check your tires before you drive," she said. Then the line went dead. I lowered the phone and looked at the two bassinets. The twins were still sleeping, their tiny chests rising and falling in perfect rhythm, completely unaware that their father had just erased their existence from his life. The apartment was silent, but the silence did not feel peaceful anymore. It felt predatory. I realized then that Grant and I had not had a fight. This was not a marital dispute. This was an eviction. I had been fired from the position of his wife, and the severance package was absolutely nothing. 3 years ago, I met a man who did not exist. I met him in a humid coffee shop in Louisville where I was sketching wireframes for a new ergonomic handle. Grant sat at the table next to mine, watching me with a kind of quiet intensity that I mistook for admiration. He did not ask me who my father was. He did not ask where I summered or what my portfolio was worth. He pointed at my sketchbook and asked, "Is that going to change how people work, or just how they look while they are working?" It was the perfect question. It made me feel seen, not assessed. For the first 6 months, Grant Whitaker was just an operations consultant who loved John Coltrane and hated cilantro. He was safe. He was normal. He drove a sedan that needed a wash. And he laughed at my terrible jokes. I fell in love with his normalcy. I fell in love with the idea that we were just two professionals building a life in the middle of America. Then came the reveal. It happened over a dinner that was too expensive for a consultant's salary. He told me his last name was not just a name, it was an economy. Whitaker Meridian Holdings, logistics, commercial real estate, regional media. He was not just a consultant, he was the heir apparent to an empire that moved half the freight in the Midwest. I should have run when I met his mother. Our first introduction was a video call. Vivian Whitaker sat in a room that looked more like a museum than a home. Her face was a mask of perfectly applied foundation and steel determination. "Where did you attend secondary school?" she asked, her pen hovering over a notepad. "Public high school in Madison," I said. "And your parents? Are they in industry?" "My father was a teacher. My mother was a nurse. She wrote something down. She did not ask if I made her son happy. She did not ask what I loved about him. She was filling out a risk assessment form. The real induction happened a year later at their estate in Lake Forest, Illinois. It was an engagement party that felt more like a shareholder meeting. I was paraded through a ballroom of senators and board members. I felt their eyes scanning me, looking for cracks, checking my posture, judging the way I held my champagne flute. It was a test I had not studied for. Vivian pulled me aside near the grand staircase. She held a small velvet box. Inside was a silver brooch, a falcon clutching a globe. The Whitaker crest. "Turn around," she commanded. I did. She pinned it to the lapel of my dress. She pushed the needle through the fabric with such force that it pierced my skin, scratching across my collarbone. I flinched, gasping in pain. "Steady," she whispered, her breath cold against my ear. "You do not flinch in this family. You belong to something bigger than yourself now. Harper, do not forget that." Grant was beaming when he saw the pin. "She accepted you," he said, kissing my cheek. "She never accepts anyone." He saw a badge of honor. I felt the sting on my skin and knew it was a brand. I was no longer a partner. I was an acquisition. The illusion fully shattered when we found out about the twins. When the ultrasound technician pointed out the 2 heartbeats, Grant wept. He held my hand and cried tears of genuine joy. For a week, we were happy. Then, he told Vivian, The late-night calls started almost immediately. Grant would disappear into his home office, closing the door tight. The murmurs from inside were not happy. They were frantic. He started sleeping in the guest room, claiming he needed to work late to secure our future. One night, 3 months ago, I woke up to get water and heard his voice drifting from the office. He was not shouting. He was pleading. But Mom, they are twins. I can't just put her away in the country. I pressed my ear against the wood, my breath catching in my throat. I know what the bylaws say. Grant's voice cracked, sounding terrified. But if I choose her, if I stay, do I lose the seat? Do I lose the trust fund? There was a long silence on his end, then a whisper. Okay, I understand. The liquidity is contingent on the seat. I understand. He walked out of that room 10 minutes later. He looked right at me, standing in the hallway in my maternity pajamas, and he smiled. But it was not his smile anymore. It was a practiced expression, a mask sliding over panic. Go back to bed, Harper, he said softly. Everything is handled. I realized then that I was not fighting a mother-in-law who disliked my background. I was up against a corporation that viewed my marriage as a liability and my children as assets to be managed. Grant had not chosen me. He had chosen the seat. And tonight, with the divorce papers on the table, the board of directors had finally cast their vote. I did not dare use the Wi-Fi in my own apartment. I had this gnawing sensation, a phantom itch at the base of my neck, telling me that the router blinking in the hallway was no longer a gateway to the world, but a surveillance device reporting back to the mothership. I drove to the Milwaukee Public Library on a Tuesday morning, leaving the twins with my neighbor for an hour. I sat in the farthest corner of the reference section, surrounded by the smell of dust and decaying paper, and logged onto a terminal with a guest pass. I was not looking for divorce attorneys yet. I was looking for the rules of the game. I searched for the Whitaker Family Trust bylaws. They were private documents, but a redacted version had been filed during a lawsuit regarding zoning rights in Chicago 5 years ago. I scrolled until my eyes burned. Then I found it. Clause 14b. Any primary beneficiary wed to a spouse not formally ratified by the family council shall forfeit all voting privileges on the board of directors until the dissolution of said union. It was not about hate. It was about math. If Grant stayed married to me, he was chemically castrated in the boardroom. When I got home, the paranoia followed me through the door. I needed to print a return label for a baby carrier that had arrived broken. The printer in Grant's home office, a room I rarely entered, now jammed. The machine whirred and clicked violently. I yanked the paper tray out to clear the feed. A sheet of paper was stuck in the rollers, printed on heavy, expensive bond stock. It was not my shipping label. It was a document Grant must have tried to print before he left, or perhaps one that had been sent to the printer remotely. The header read, Containment Plan, Phase 2. My hands went cold. I smoothed the crumpled paper on the desk. It was a list of bullet points, clinical and precise. Control the narrative postpartum instability. Asset freeze immediate execution. Social audit establish pattern of neglect. Leverage by silence, NDA execution. I felt like I was reading my own autopsy report while I was still breathing. 2 days later, a man in a gray suit showed up at Northline Brandworks. He introduced himself to HR as an external auditor reviewing compliance. But when he cornered me in the break room, his questions were not about compliance. Mrs. Whitaker, he said, his voice oily, regarding your late nights in the prototyping lab last November. Logs show you were clocked in with a Mr. Henderson until 2 a.m. Was that strictly professional? I stared at him, my coffee cup trembling in my hand. I was pregnant. We were rushing the holiday launch. Are you asking me if I was having an affair while I was 7 months pregnant? He just smiled, wrote something in a notebook, and walked away. They were digging for dirt, and if they could not find it, they were going to manufacture it. The direct assault came on a Sunday. Vivian arrived in a black sedan. She did not come alone. She brought a woman in scrubs she introduced as a night nurse to help me rest. You look terrible. Harper, Vivian said, setting a thick leather folder on the kitchen island. We want to help. This is a support agreement. It covers medical costs for the children, a generous monthly stipend for you, and housing assistance. I opened the folder. The numbers were high. Very high. But I flipped past the money to page 4, paragraph 7, non-disclosure agreement and non-disparagement clause. It was a gag order. If I signed, I could never speak about the Whitaker family, the marriage, or the divorce to anyone. Not a therapist, not a friend, not a judge. I am not signing this, I said, closing the folder. You want to buy my silence. Vivian inspected a speck of dust on my counter. Everyone has a price. Dear, we just need to find the right number. Do not be naive. You have no income. You have 2 infants. Do not let pride starve my grandchildren. Get out, I whispered. Think about it, she said, signaling the nurse to follow her out. The offer expires in 24 hours. That evening, Grant came by to pick up some files. He looked even worse than before, pale, with dark circles under his eyes. He tossed a manila envelope onto the table. Why, Harper, he asked. His voice sounded broken. Why what? The photos. I opened the envelope. Inside were grainy photos of me at a company party 2 years ago. In the pictures, I was laughing, leaning close to a male colleague to hear over the music. But the angle, the way it was cropped, made it look intimate. It looked compromising. Grant, this is from the Christmas party. You were standing 3 feet away when this was taken, I shouted, my voice rising in panic. They cropped you out. He shook his head, looking at me with a mix of disgust and pity. Mother said you would deny it. She said the behavior patterns were there all along. You believe this? I gasped. You actually believe this. I do not know who you are anymore, he said, and walked out. I stood there, clutching the fake evidence, realizing the genius of their cruelty. They did not just want to beat me in court. They wanted to break Grant's attachment to me so completely that he would feel righteous in destroying me. I turned to look at the blinking red light of the motion sensor in the hallway. Suddenly, the system panel on the wall beeped loudly. System update complete. Rebooting. I ran to the control pad. The log history was zeroed out. The footage of Grant leaving, of Vivian visiting, of the auditor waiting in the lobby, all of it was gone. The screen was a blank, glowing blue. Someone had just erased the last 2 weeks of my life, and I was the only witness left standing in the dark. The drive home from the hospital was the quietest hour of my life. Grant drove the SUV with both hands gripping the wheel at 10 and 2, staring straight ahead at the wet highway. He did not look in the rearview mirror to check on the twins strapped into their car seats. He did not ask if I was comfortable. He drove like he was transporting a box of sensitive legal files that he was eager to drop off at a storage facility. When we pulled into the driveway, he unlocked the doors but did not get out to help. I carried 2 car seats up the stairs, one by one, feeling my stitches pull with every step. That was the last time I saw him as a husband. Now, the apartment was just a container for my panic. The mail arrived on a Tuesday, a thick stack of envelopes that smelled like impending doom. The first one was from the insurance provider. Notice of cancellation. I called the number, my voice trembling. The representative told me the policy had been terminated retroactively to the 1st of the month. Then I opened the hospital bill. I stared at the number at the bottom of the page. $42,580. This cannot be right, I whispered to the empty room. I have coverage, but I did not. Grant had timed the divorce perfectly. He had cut the cord right when the medical costs were highest, leaving the debt entirely in my name. I needed money. I called Northline Brandworks immediately. I told myself I could handle going back to work early. I could pump in the supply closet. I could work remotely. I am so sorry, Harper, the HR director said, her voice smooth and rehearsed. We have undergone a restructuring. Your position has been eliminated effective yesterday. Eliminated I am on maternity leave. You cannot fire me while I am on leave. It is a department-wide layoff." She lied. "It is unrelated to your status. We will mail your personal effects." I hung up and immediately opened my laptop. I applied for 3 remote design jobs. I got one interview the next afternoon. I put on a blazer over my nursing tank top and set the laptop on a stack of books in the kitchen, aiming the camera away from the drying rack full of bottles. 10 minutes into the interview, Leo started crying. It was a high, piercing wail that cut through the thin walls of the bedroom. The interviewer, a man with a sleek haircut and a blurred background, stopped mid-sentence. He frowned. "Is that a baby? I am so sorry," I said, trying to keep my smile fixed. "My nanny is just handling a transition. 1 second, Mrs. Caldwell," he said, closing his notebook. "We operate in a high-speed environment. We need a quiet environment for our remote staff. This does not look like a fit." The screen went black. I put my head on the table and just breathed, trying not to scream. A courier arrived an hour later. It was a package from Vivian. Inside was a set of cashmere blankets, soft as butter, in a shade of cream that cost more than my rent. There was a card on heavy cardstock. "The children are innocent. Do not let your pride deprive them of what they deserve." It was a slap in the face wrapped in silk. She wanted me to know that she could provide for them, and I could not. She was building a case for custody based on resources. I looked at the electric bill on the counter. It was 3 days overdue. I looked at the box of diapers. Empty. I took the diamond engagement ring off my finger. It left a pale tan line on my skin, a ghost of the marriage. I walked 3 blocks to a pawn shop with bars on the windows. The man behind the counter screwed a jeweler's loop into his eye and examined the stone. $1,200, he grunted. "It was appraised for $8,000, I said, my voice shaking. "The clarity is VVS1. It is a Whittaker diamond. I do not care if it is a Queen of England diamond. 1,200. Take it or leave it." I took the cash. It felt dirty in my hands. I bought 3 boxes of diapers, formula, and paid the electric bill. I had sold the symbol of my eternal love to keep the lights on for another month. When I got back, I collapsed on the sofa. I had hit a wall. I was so tired that my vision was blurring at the edges. A knock on the door made me jump. It was Darlene Pike, my neighbor from 4B. She was a woman in her 60s with forearms like steel cables and eyes that had seen everything. She used to be a NICU nurse. She took one look at me and walked in. "Go to sleep," she ordered. "I can't." The twins. I handled triple births in the crunch ward in 1992. I can handle 2 sleeping potatoes. Go to bed. Harper. I slept for 6 hours. It was a deep, black sleep, the kind where you do not dream. When I woke up, the apartment was quiet. Darlene was sitting in the rocking chair, feeding Leo, while holding the other bottle for Liam with a practiced tilt of her wrist. She pointed to the kitchen table. There was a heavy metal object sitting there. It was an old sewing machine, an industrial model that looked like it could stitch through concrete. "My old Singer," Darlene said. "Built like a tank. It runs straight and true." "Why are you giving me this?" I asked, rubbing my eyes. "Because I saw you sell that ring," she said, her voice rough. "You are fighting a war with empty hands. Girl, empty hands get crushed. Do something. Make something." I walked over to the machine. I ran my hand over the cold metal body. Darlene was right. If I played by their rules, lawyers, courts, corporate structures, I would be ground into dust. They had the money. They had the time. But they did not know what it felt like to be cornered. I looked at the cashmere blankets Vivian had sent. Beautiful fabric, expensive, and completely useless for a mother trying to change a diaper at 3 a.m. I picked up a pair of scissors. "Thank you, Darlene," I said. I was not going to be the victim they wrote into their little containment plan. I was going to be the problem they never saw coming. It was 3 in the morning when the idea was born, not from inspiration, but from pure, unadulterated rage. I was trying to change Liam's diaper in the dark. He was finally drowsy, his eyelids heavy, and I was holding my breath, praying he would stay asleep. I lined up the snaps on his onesie. Snap! The sound was sharp and metallic. Snap! Louder. Liam's eyes flew open. He startled, his little arms jerking up, and then the wailing began. No, no, please don't, I whispered, tears of exhaustion pricking my eyes. Please go back to sleep. I looked at the garment in my hands. It had 12 metal buttons that had to be aligned perfectly. It was a torture device. Whoever designed this hates parents. I hissed to the empty room. I did not go back to sleep. I carried the crying baby to the living room, put him in the swing, and sat down at Darlene's heavy iron sewing machine. I took the scissors and sliced the metal snaps right out of the fabric. It felt violent, and it felt good. I rummaged through my old design kit and found a roll of soft, silent magnetic tape and a strip of low-profile loop fabric. I sewed them into the seams. No clicking, no lining up tiny holes in the dark. Just a soft whoosh to open, and a silent seal to close. I tested it on the table. Open. Close. Silent. I made 2 prototypes before the sun came up. I called it the Hush Wrap. At 8 o'clock, I took a picture. I did not use filters. I just laid the onesie on the clean part of my rug. I posted it to a local Wisconsin parents group on social media. I did not write marketing copy. I wrote the truth. I am a single mother of twins. I am tired of waking my babies up with metal snaps. I made this so we can all sleep. If anyone needs one, I can sew it for you. By noon, I had 12 messages. By 5 o'clock, I had 30 orders. I felt a surge of adrenaline I had not felt in months. I was cutting fabric on the kitchen island, calculating yardage in my head. But then, a notification pinged. It was a cancellation from a woman named Brenda. Sorry, I am canceling. I found a 3-pack at the supermarket for $12. Yours is too expensive for just one. I stared at the screen. I was charging $20 to cover materials and electricity. I sat on the floor, holding the package I had just addressed to her, and I felt the hope drain out of me. I could not compete with a factory in China. I was just a desperate woman with a sewing machine. Darlene walked in without knocking. She took one look at me and shook her head. Get up, she said. I brought reinforcements. Behind her stood a girl who looked about 22. She had bright purple hair, a nose ring, and was chewing gum with terrifying speed. This is Juno Hart, Darlene said. She sells vintage clothes online. She moves product. Juno looked around my apartment, stepping over a pile of fabric scraps. She picked up the Hush Wrap and pulled the magnetic seal apart. Her eyes widened. This is sick, Juno said, but your branding is tragic. You are selling it like it is a craft project. You need to sell it like it is a lifesaver. I cannot pay you, I said, wiping my face. I have zero budget. I do not want a salary. I want 20% of the gross, Juno said, pulling up a chair and opening her laptop. And we are not competing with the supermarket. We are a boutique find. We are small batch. We are raising the price to $35. 35? No one will pay that, watch me, she said. Within 48 hours, Juno had turned my living room into a fulfillment center. She organized orders by color code. She took new photos, artsy, shadowed shots that made the magnetic closure look like alien technology. We sold out of my fabric stock in 2 days. Then the letter came. It was a thick envelope from a law firm in Chicago, Whitaker, Stone and Associates. I opened it, my hands shaking. It was a cease and desist order. They were claiming that by posting photos of Whitaker heirs on a commercial platform, I was violating their privacy and exploiting minors. They demanded I remove all images immediately. They are watching, I whispered. They saw the store. Juno read the letter over my shoulder. They are scared. You are making noise. They want me to take it down. If I don't, they will sue me for damages I cannot pay. So take it down, Juno said, shrugging. Malicious compliance. Babe. I went to the computer. I did not delete the posts. I cropped the photos. I cut off the heads of the babies, leaving only their bodies in the hush wraps. I blurred the background so no one could see where we lived. I followed their instructions to the letter, but I did not stop selling. Then, I created a new folder on my hard drive. I named it Insurance. I started screenshotting everything. The timestamps on the legal threats, the logs of when Grant logged into our old shared cloud, the dates on the medical bills. You want a war, I said to the screen, watching the cursor blink. I am building an arsenal. The video that changed everything was 20 seconds of raw, unedited footage. It was just my hands demonstrating the silent magnetic clasp on the hush wrap, with a caption that said, "Sleeping babies should stay sleeping." I posted it on a Tuesday evening. By Wednesday morning, it had 3 million views. The notification sound on my phone became a constant, rhythmic chime. Ka-ching, ka-ching. Orders were pouring in from mothers in London, grandmothers in Texas, and fathers in Tokyo. For the first time since Grant walked out, I saw a door opening. I saw a way to pay the rent without selling my blood. But Grant saw something else. An email arrived from his personal address at 2 a.m. No subject line. I see what you are doing. Do not make a scene. Harper, do not force me to escalate this. The board is watching. He did not ask about the twins. He did not ask if we had food. He was terrified. I realized then that he was not afraid of losing his family. He was afraid of the family council revoking his seat. That afternoon, I received a text message from a blocked number. They are going to use your success to prove you are unstable. They will say you are exploiting the children for clicks. Meet me at the parking garage on 4th and State. Row C, midnight. I should not have gone. It was the kind of decision people in horror movies make. But desperation makes you brave. I left the twins with Darlene and drove to the garage. A woman was waiting by a gray sedan. She looked nervous, checking her watch repeatedly. She introduced herself as Elise Rourke, a former junior associate at Silver Wren Strategies, a crisis management firm the Whitakers kept on retainer. Why are you helping me? I asked, keeping my hand on the pepper spray in my pocket. Because they fired me for getting pregnant, she said, her voice bitter. Here. She shoved a thin file into my hand. The cover page read, Project Optics Custody Strategy. I opened it under the harsh yellow light of the street lamp. It was a draft for a press briefing. It analyzed my viral video not as a business success, but as a symptom of mania. Subject exhibits erratic behavior. Commercial exploitation of infants indicates financial desperation and a chaotic home environment unfit for custody. They are going to paint you as the crazy mom selling her kids for internet fame, Elise said, stepping back into the shadows. They want to prove you are too busy running a sweatshop to be a mother. Get a lawyer. A real one. I drove to Madison the next day. I walked into the office of Veronica Hale. She was known as a shark in a skirt, a woman who ate corporate attorneys for lunch. I put the hush-wrap sales figures and the Silver Wren document on her desk. Veronica lit a cigarette, ignoring the smoke detector. She read the file in silence. Do not cry online, Veronica said, exhaling a plume of smoke. That is rule number 1. No sad posts, no rants about your ex. You are not a victim. Harper, you are a CEO. We do not fight with tears. We fight with files. I cannot afford your retainer. I said, you will pay me when we win. She said, her eyes narrowing. I hate bullies. The Whitaker legal team responded to my hiring of Veronica by declaring total war. They sent 20 boxes of discovery requests. They wanted every bank statement, every grocery receipt, and every email I had sent for the last 5 years. They were trying to drown me in paper, hoping I would run out of money or sanity trying to comply. My life became a split screen. By day, I was running hush wrap with Juno, packing orders and negotiating with fabric suppliers. By night, I was a paralegal in my own defense. I scanned thousands of pages. I saved the receipt for a $3 coffee to prove I was fiscally responsible. I became obsessively clean. If they want to fight. I told Juno as we taped up boxes at 4 in the morning. I will be so clean, I squeak. Then, a small venture capital fund from Chicago reached out. They wanted to meet. They were interested in investing in hush wrap. I can't do this. I told Veronica on the phone. I have a deposition on Thursday. I have 2 babies teething. I can't pitch to investors. You have to take the meeting, Veronica insisted. The Whitakers are saying you are a manic woman running a garage sale. You need to prove you are a serious entrepreneur. If a legitimate fund backs you, their crazy narrative falls apart. Put on a suit. Harper, go be the boss. I hung up the phone. I looked at the custody optics file on my desk. They wanted to paint me as a mess. I was going to show them I was a machine. It was a Tuesday afternoon when the kaleidoscope shifted, and for the first time, the chaotic fragments of my life arranged themselves into a clear, sharp picture. I was sitting in Veronica's conference room, surrounded by boxes of discovery documents that smelled of old toner and dust. Veronica was not looking at the new lawsuits. She was reading a yellowed document from 40 years ago, a copy of the original trust formation documents established by Grant's grandfather, Silas Whitaker. "Harper," Veronica said, her voice dropping to a register I had never heard before. It was not her usual aggressive tone. It was the hushed reverence of a hunter who had just spotted a fatal wound on the prey. "Come read this." I walked over. She pointed to a paragraph in the middle of page 62. The font was archaic, typewriter-style courier. Clause 9C, the anti-abandonment provision. Read it out loud. She commanded. I squinted at the text. In the event that any direct heir abandons their issue within 12 months of birth, and unilaterally ceases financial maintenance without a judicial decree, the voting proxy for said issue's trust portion shall immediately transfer to the primary custodial guardian until the issue reaches the age of majority. I looked up at Veronica, trying to process the legalese. What does that mean? Veronica smiled, and it was a terrifying thing to witness. It means Silas Whitaker hated deadbeat dads. He wrote a poison pill into the family constitution. If an heir walks out on a baby and cuts off the money before a judge says he can, he loses control of the money. Not ownership. Harper. Control. My brain clicked. The pieces slammed together with the force of a physical blow. "Vivian," I whispered. She made him do it. She told him to cut the credit cards. She told him to cancel the insurance retroactive to the 1st of the month. She wanted to starve me out. "Exactly," Veronica said, slamming her hand on the table in triumph. "She thought she was tightening the noose around your neck, but because she was arrogant, because she bypassed the court to inflict pain faster, she triggered Clause 9C. By cutting your financial lifeline without a court order, Grant just handed you the keys to the kingdom. He handed me the voting rights," I said, the realization making me dizzy. If I control the twins' shares, then you are not just the ex-wife, Veronica finished. You are the tie-breaking vote on the Whitaker family board. We moved with the speed of a tactical strike team. Veronica drafted the emergency petition for spousal support and full custody within the hour. The goal was not just to get money, it was to lock the timeline. We needed a judge to stamp a piece of paper confirming that as of today, Grant Whitaker had provided $0 in support for 45 days. That stamp was the detonator. I went back to the apartment and turned my living room into a bunker. Juno and I stopped acting like a startup and started acting like we were under federal indictment. Every receipt. I told Juno, my voice flat and calm. I want a paper trail for every diaper, every spool of thread, every stamp, if they audit us. I want them to find that we are boringly, painfully honest. I have logged the coffee beans we bought yesterday, Juno said, typing furiously. We are clean, Harper. We are sterile. My phone buzzed. It was Elise. I have the calendar. Project Row Exit. It shows the meetings where they planned the divorce timeline to coincide with your third trimester. They called it a risk mitigation strategy. I can't give it to you yet. They are tracking my email. Keep it safe, I texted back. Do not burn it yet. I did not need the calendar to win in court anymore. I needed it for the court of public opinion. I saved the screenshot to the insurance folder. 2 days later, the counterattack arrived. It was not a legal motion. It was the front page of the Milwaukee City Chronicle. The headline was vague, but the target was unmistakable. The influencer trap when mothers market their children for clicks. The article did not name me, but it described a local mother of twins who was monetizing her family struggle and selling products based on a narrative of abandonment. It quoted an anonymous family friend who claimed the father was devastated and being kept away by a media-hungry ex-wife. I stood in my kitchen, reading the paper on my phone. The old Harper would have cried. The old Harper would have called Grant and begged him to stop. But I was not the old Harper. I looked at the article and saw it for what it was, a dinosaur trying to roar at a meteor. Vivian thought she could control the narrative because she could buy a newspaper columnist. She did not understand that the power had shifted. She was playing a game of reputation in a boardroom. But I had the audience. They think this hurts us, Juno asked, looking at the screen. No, I said, putting the phone down. It proves they are scared. They are trying to destroy my character because they know they have already lost the law. Let them talk. Juno. Let them scream. We are not listening to them anymore. We are listening to the sound of the trap snapping shut. The green room at the Sunrise Ledger Studios smelled of hairspray and nervous energy. Veronica stood directly in front of me, her hands gripping my shoulders, her eyes locking onto mine with the intensity of a drill sergeant. Remember the rules, she said, her voice low and urgent. You do not mention the Whitaker name. You do not mention the divorce proceedings. You do not look angry. If you come across as a scorned wife seeking revenge, they will sue us for defamation before the commercial break. You are a CEO. You are a mother who built a boat because the water was rising. That is the only story you tell today. I am ready, I said, smoothing the lapel of my dark navy blazer. When the cameras turned on, I did not feel the panic I expected. I felt a strange, cold clarity. The host, a woman with a sympathetic tilt to her head, leaned forward. Harper, your product, the hush wrap, has become a viral sensation overnight, but the story behind it is quite personal. What drove a new mother to start a manufacturing business from her living room? I looked into the lens. I imagined Vivian watching. I imagined Grant watching. I found myself suddenly alone. I said, keeping my voice steady and level. I had 2 newborn children and a life that had changed overnight. I did not have the luxury of time. I had to survive. I looked at a problem loud snaps waking up my babies, and I realized that if I did not fix it, no one else would. I had to build a life for them. On the large monitor behind us, the producers played the B-roll footage we had provided. It showed the twins rolling on a soft rug, bathed in morning sunlight, wearing the hush wraps. They were smiling. The apartment looked cozy, organized, and filled with love. It was not the chaotic home of a manic woman that the Whitakers were trying to sell to the court. It was a fortress of stability. I knew that somewhere, perhaps in a glass-walled conference room in Kansas City. Grant was watching this. He was seeing his children laughing. He was seeing me, not as the hysterical burden his mother had described, but as a woman standing tall. The moment the segment ended and the cameras cut to commercial, my phone buzzed in Veronica's hand. She looked at the screen and raised an eyebrow. That was fast. It was an email from the Whitaker legal team. They were proposing an immediate comprehensive settlement discussion on the condition that I cease all further media appearances. They were trying to plug the leak. Then, a text message arrived from Grant. I stared at the screen, my heart skipping a beat. My mother lied. 4 words. It was the first time he had communicated with me as a human being in months. It was a crack in the dam. He had seen the reality on the screen, and it had finally broken through the fiction Vivian had been feeding him. But Vivian was not retreating. She was reloading. By the time we got back to the hotel, the tone of the negotiations had shifted. The offer from the Whitaker team was no longer just a settlement. It was a buyout. They wanted to buy the Hush Rap brand, the patent pending, and my silence. They demanded a strict non-disclosure agreement and a complete transfer of intellectual property, and there was a threat attached. If I did not sign by Saturday, they would run a feature story in the Sunday papers detailing my exploitation of the children and my financial instability. I looked at the offer. She wants to take the business. She wants to take the one thing I built that she didn't give me. She wants to erase you, Veronica corrected. She wants to own the success so she can bury the origin story. I picked up the phone and called the executive producer of Sunrise Ledger. I have a meeting with a potential investor, I told him, lying smoothly. But I am worried about the optics. Would you be willing to send a business observer to document the negotiation? I want to make sure everything is transparent. He agreed immediately. He smelled a follow-up story. I turned to Veronica. Vivian thinks she is walking into a secret execution. She does not know she is walking onto a stage. Veronica smiled, lighting a cigarette with a click of her lighter. That is the move. Harper, you do not need to win by shouting. You win by having witnesses. The night before the mediation in Denver, I did not pack extra bottles or pacifiers. I stood in the sterile hotel room, arranging documents on the bedspread with the precision of a bomb disposal technician. My life was no longer measured in feeding schedules. It was measured in leverage. A courier had delivered a small encrypted USB drive from Elise Rourke an hour earlier. I plugged it into my laptop, my fingers hovering over the trackpad. The folder was titled Project Clean Break. I clicked it open. It was not just a legal strategy. It was a demolition manual. There were emails dated 5 months before the twins were born. While I was painting the nursery, silver-tongued consultants at Silver Wren Strategies were drafting memos on how to seed doubt regarding the timeline of conception to leverage a better settlement. They had planned to accuse me of infidelity before the babies even took their first breaths. Look at the timestamps, Veronica said, looking over my shoulder. Created August 14th. You were barely showing. They were planning the divorce while you were picking out onesies. It is premeditated, I said, feeling a cold rage settle in my stomach. It is not a breakup. It is a corporate liquidation of a human being. Juno was on the other bed, furiously typing on her laptop. She was locking down our defense against the neglectful mother narrative. She pulled up the logs. Every order, every shipment, every customer service email was time-stamped and cross-referenced with the schedule of the night nanny we had hired with the Hush Rap profits. Let them claim chaos, Juno said, not looking up. I have logs showing you were breastfeeding while approving purchase orders. We have a paper trail that proves you are a machine. Harper, we are bulletproof. My phone rang. It was a restricted number. I looked at Veronica. She nodded and started the recording app on her tablet. This is Harper, I said. Mrs. Caldwell, a smooth voice said. It was one of the Whitaker associates. We are authorized to offer a significant cash incentive. $2 million deposited tomorrow. All we need is a signature on the NDA and a cessation of all future claims. Think about the children. I am thinking about them, I said, my voice steady. That is why I am recording this call as evidence of witness tampering. The line went dead immediately. Then, Grant called. I debated not answering, but I needed to hear him one last time before I destroyed him. I put it on speaker, signaling Veronica to keep recording. Harper. His voice sounded thin, exhausted. Can we meet, just us? No lawyers. I just want to see the boys. I want to explain. No. I said, if you want to see your children, you do it in a supervised room with legal counsel and a camera present, like a prison visit. Please. I didn't want it to be like this. You cut off the insurance. Grant. You locked the bank accounts. You left us with nothing. There was a silence on the other end, heavy and suffocating. "I had to," he whispered. "Vivian made you," I said, giving him an out one last time. "No," he said, and the confession hung in the air like smoke. Mom told me to wait. She wanted to file the papers first. I logged in and froze the accounts myself. I felt the blood drain from my face. "You did it. I was scared. Harper. I knew you. I knew if you had access to money, you would fight. You would drag it out. I just wanted it to be over. I wanted you to give up." He had not been a puppet. He had been the executioner. He had looked at his pregnant wife and decided that starving her of resources was the safest tactical move. "So you were not being controlled," I said, my voice dropping to a temperature that could crack glass. "You chose? You looked at the mother of your children and you chose to break her legs so she couldn't run. Harper, please, save it for the judge," I said, and ended the call. I turned to the bed and picked up the heavy steel lockbox I had brought from Milwaukee. It contained the final piece of the puzzle, the document that Veronica had unearthed, the one that turned their own greed into a weapon. I placed the box in my tote bag. It was heavy, but it felt good. It felt like justice. "Are you ready?" Veronica asked. "He thinks he is walking into a negotiation," I said, zipping the bag shut. "He has no idea he is walking into a transfer of power." The mediation began in silence on the top floor of the Hotel Monaco in Denver. The Whitaker family had rented the entire floor, ensuring that no stray guests would witness the dismantling of their heir's marriage. Vivian Whitaker sat at the head of the long mahogany table, flanked by 3 attorneys in charcoal suits. She looked like a queen holding court, her posture rigid, her hands clasped over a leather folio. She was trying to make me feel small. She was trying to remind me that I was a guest in her world and that guests could be evicted. One of her lawyers slid a check across the polished wood. It stopped right in front of my hands. I looked down. It was for $5 million. Next to it was a document thick enough to be a novel. "This is the exit package," the lawyer said, his voice devoid of inflection. "It includes a permanent non-disclosure agreement. It also stipulates that you will immediately cease operations of the brand Hush Wrap or rebrand it under a holding company managed by Whitaker Meridian. Furthermore, you will agree to a complete cessation of all public appearances regarding your domestic situation." I did not touch the paper. I did not even blink. "No," I said. Vivian sighed. A sound of theatrical disappointment. "Harper, do not be difficult. We have the morality file. We have testimony from neighbors regarding your instability. We have the leverage to petition for full custody and brand you as an exploiter of children. We will file the injunction to shut down your little sewing business in 48 hours. You mean the neighbor you paid?" Veronica asked. She tossed a thin file onto the table. "Forensic accounting is a beautiful thing. Your shell company paid Mrs. Borgable $5,000 as a consulting fee 2 days before she signed her affidavit." "That is witness tampering." Vivian stiffened, her eyes darting to her lawyer. "That is circumstantial." And the timestamps on the photos of the messy apartment, Veronica continued, relentless. "Metadata shows they were altered. You are not building a case. Vivian, you are manufacturing evidence." "It does not matter," Vivian snapped, her composure cracking. "We have the resources to keep this in court until the twins are in college. You cannot win a war of attrition." "I do not have to," I said. I nodded to the man sitting quietly in the corner. He opened a notebook and set it on the table with a deliberate thud. "Who is that?" Vivian demanded. "That is the executive producer for Sunrise Ledger," I said. "He is here as an independent business observer. Everything you say, every threat you make, it is on the record. And he has a very large audience." Vivian went pale. She realized instantly that she could not bully me in the dark anymore. The lights were on. I reached into my bag and pulled out the USB drive Elise had given me. I placed it on the table next to her check. I have the timeline, I said softly. Project Clean Break. I know you planned the divorce while I was painting the nursery. I know it was a strategy, not a breakup. Vivian stared at the drive like it was a grenade. But Veronica was not done. She opened the old trust document to the page we had bookmarked, and regarding the custody of the assets, Veronica said, her voice ringing clear in the silent room, we are invoking the anti-abandonment clause planted by Silas Whitaker, Clause 9C. The lead Whitaker attorney froze. He knew what it meant. Grant unilaterally ceased financial support for his issue within 12 months of birth without a judicial decree. Veronica read, therefore, the voting proxy for the children's shares transfers immediately to the primary custodial guardian. That is Harper. That is impossible, Vivian hissed. Grant would never. Grant did, I said, looking at my husband. He was sitting at the far end of the table, his head in his hands. He froze the accounts to starve me out. He pulled the trigger that handed me the gun. The room went dead silent. The realization hit Vivian like a physical blow. She had not just lost the money. By forcing Grant to be cruel, she had handed me the voting rights to a significant block of the family company. I was now a proxy board member until the twins turned 18. Grant stood up. He looked tired, but for the first time in years, he looked awake. He pulled a document from his jacket pocket and placed it on the table. It was an affidavit with a notary stamp. I am withdrawing my petition for custody, Grant said, his voice shaking slightly. I am admitting to the setup, and I am agreeing to independent monitoring. Grant, Vivian shouted, standing up. You are destroying your legacy. Grant looked at his mother, his eyes sad. No, Mom. You were not protecting the legacy. You were just protecting your seat. I reached into my bag one last time and pulled out the steel lockbox. I keyed in the code and opened the lid. Inside was the final agreement Veronica and I had drafted. This is the new deal, I said, sliding it toward Vivian. Long-term support indexed to the trust value, civil damages for the fraud, and a strictly independent custodial council chaired by me. You will sign it, or the producer walks out of here and runs the story about how the Whitaker family tried to frame a mother. Vivian looked at the producer, then at the USB drive, and finally at her son who would not meet her eyes. She picked up the pen. Her hand trembled as she signed the paper, surrendering the control she had worshipped for 40 years. I signed next to her. The ink was black and permanent. I stood up, smoothing my skirt. I looked at Grant, the man I had once loved, the man who had tried to erase me. You tried to take everything in the divorce, I said, my voice steady and quiet. You thought I would break, but you didn't know. You were the one who gave me the power to ensure no one ever takes my children from me again. I walked out of the room, leaving the check on the table. I did not need their money to survive anymore. I had won something far more valuable. I had won my life back. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please drop a comment below and let's share our thoughts. If you enjoyed Harper's journey, please make sure to subscribe to Victoria Revenge Stories, like the video, and smash that hype button so this story can reach even more people.